There are a couple ways to add a color tint to an image that you've converted to black and white in Lightroom. Probably the simplest way is to start over here on the left-hand panel under Lightroom black and white tone presets. Now I'm just going to hold my cursor over the name and you can see up above a preview of what that preset will do to my image. There's lots of different choices here. That's probably the simplest way of getting a toned look to your black and white image. Now for the ultimate control, you're going to want to come over here to the right side panels under split toning. So let me go ahead and open that up and explain how to use the split toning controls. Now the theory of this is that you can apply a particular color or tint to the highlights and the shadows separately. In other words, you can choose one color that will be applied to a highlight and another color that will be applied to a shadow. And then in the middle here you have a balance slider which then determines the weight towards highlights or shadows. So you can weigh it towards the shadows or you can weigh it to the highlights. So let me show you how this works. So let's start with highlights. Now the first thing you'll notice when you click on the slider and drag the hue, nothing happens. You would think something would happen, but in fact nothing's happening because right now saturation is set to 0. So there's no saturation, therefore you won't see any of the effect of moving that slider. Now if you want, you can hold down the Option or Alt key and then click on it. And what it's showing now are the actual colors at 100% saturation. As soon as you release the Option or Alt key, saturation goes back down to 0. But this is a good way of kind of visualizing what color you might want in the highlights. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a cooler color for the highlights in the blue. Now if I don't find the color that I'm looking for here on this slider, if I click on this color swatch here, I can actually pick a color right there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And the saturation, you can see how that affects the color. Now if I move the saturation slider to the left, there's going to be less of that blue showing up. And I think I'll bring it right about to there. So now we're controlling the highlights. So the blue is only going to the highlights. Let's move down to the shadows now. So the same thing holds true here. If I move this hue slider, nothing will happen unless I move the saturation slider or I hold down the Option or Alt key. And I'll do that right now. I'm going to try to find a warmer color for the shadows, maybe right in there. Okay, and I'll release my Option or Alt key and move the saturation slider over until I get the right balance that I'm looking for. I want to warm those shadows up. Okay, right about there. Now, when I look at the picture, I can see that I probably want to add a little bit of saturation to the blue and the highlights. Give it more balanced out there. So now I've got the blue going into the highlight area and this kind of a orangey warm color going into the shadow area. Now watch how the balance slider works. If I move this balance slider to the left, it's putting all the emphasis onto the shadow hue. So now it's just the orange of the shadow tint showing up. And if I move the balance to the right, it's going to the cooler blue color that I've placed in the highlight. But I'm going to keep that right in the middle for now. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I'm going to hit the L key and go to Lights Out. That's what I usually do to get a good sense of what I've done to an image. Bring the lights back on by hitting the L key again. And I can also hit the Y key and give my preview window a before and after look. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. So I'll go back to the loop view. At this point, there's a couple things I could do. I could make a preset. Let's say I really like this look and I want to save it. To create a preset, I just come over here, click this plus sign. I go ahead and because I'm only wanting to do the split toning, I would check none and then just make sure that the split toning is selected, give it a name, and then save it. I'll cancel now because I'm not going to go through the whole process. But then I would have a preset that has these settings that could be applied to other images in the future. Now the other thing I could have done earlier on is create a virtual copy, and then I would have had my original, and I could make as many virtual copies as I want and really play around and have fun. That's what this is all about. Having fun. Anything you do is non-destructible. You can always go back and change it later. But playing around with the split toning controls, I think you can come up with some really cool effects.